gentlemen, welcome to another brand new episode of the Jedi Way here on the Outlaw Nation channel. I am the Outlaw, John Rocha, joined as always by my better half on this show, Laura Kelly. Laura, how are you?
I'm amazing. When you started talking, I was almost like the geek, but like I still am in the habit of I haven't adjusted back to the Jedi way yet. So welcome back to the Jedi Way, everybody.
It's funny you say that. I was looking through our playlist because, I'm always hypersensitive about, am I wearing the same shirt? Am I doing it? Because I do so many things. I just want to make sure there's enough variety when people are watching. And I was looking, I was like, oh my God, we really did take a break between our show and then before we brought the show back. So this is what our second I think our second one back after the big break. So I was kind of surprised at how much of a break we did take, but it was great to see people see over 3,000 views on our last episode. That's one of the biggest views count we've had. So very kind of people to be excited about the things that we're doing here on the show. And clearly they wanted the show to come back. And so thanks to all of you who watched last week's episode or the other week's episode, and you're watching this episode now. We appreciate it madly. If this is your first time sampling some of the Star Wars content on here on the channel, welcome aboard. This is a fun show that Laura and I do every couple of weeks where we break down some theoretical concept or some concept in Star Wars and talk about it. And occasionally we'll talk about current news. And certainly this is one of those episodes that qualifies for that, Laura. We got the Kenobi trailer, and a little bit later we're going to be talking about the idea of attachment in Star Wars. That's what our basic overall subject is for today's episode. But we'd be remiss not to start with the teaser trailer for Kenobi, 1 minute and 46 seconds. Laura Kelly, we got to see Obi-Wan on Tatooine. We got to see a new planet. I think it's Daewoo, I think is how it's pronounced. We got to see Reva. We got to see Moses Ingram as Reva here. We got to see the Grand Inquisitors. We got to see the Fortress Inquisitores. I think we got to see the Fortress Inquisitores. So much shown, and we got to see a young Luke Skywalker possibly pod racing or flying an X-Wing. And Uncle Owen looking like a badass, and not original trilogy Uncle Owen, Joel Edgerton Uncle Owen. So tell me, what was your and we heard the scores, we heard the sound cues for Duel of the Fates and all of that. So what was your reaction to the trailer? What was your feeling coming out of the trailer? We're fresh off a Book of Boba Fett. So what was your feelings and reactions when you saw this trailer? What's your thoughts?
I was really surprised how excited I got for it. And I think I have to attribute that mostly to prequel music of all things. Like hearing it, like Duel of the Fates music cue in there, I was just like mind blown. So I haven't sat down and watched a lot of the trailer, like breakdowns and Easter eggs and all that stuff. But I did watch it like maybe 10 times over the course of the day that it came out. If you work with me and you heard me just say that, I didn't. That's not, I lied. But it was it was just so wonderful to finally get in, to finally see like a sneak preview and finally see some more about what this show is and what it's going to look like and who's going to be in it and who they're going to play. Just so incredibly exciting. I've seen a lot of the theories about is that Tamara Morrison in one of those shots? I gotta think it might be. So I just I'm very excited. So I think that I was really surprised though. I'm like, my better half on my other show, Forced Toast, Alice is a huge Obi-Wan Kenobi fan, huge Ewan McGregor fan. And I was really surprised how strongly I reacted to this trailer, because I kind of felt like she's going to be the one that freaks out about this. So what were your thoughts on it? What got you excited?
Oh, I mean, look, just seeing Ewan McGregor back officially. Like, I know you can announce it, you can say it, you can show me EW pictures, Entertainment Weekly pictures, but until I see him actually moving around, until I see him actually in the costume, in the outfit, until I hear him actually speaking as Obi-Wan, it's not 100% real to me. So seeing him come back as Obi-Wan, because I loved him in the prequel series. I'm not a prequels lover, but I did love him in that series. And so to see him come back and embrace this role again, and the condition that he's in, Laura, they're pulling no punches here. He's a broken man. He's questioning his faith. He's questioning the Jedi way. So, for lack of a better term, he's questioning everything that happened here because of all the losses he suffered. I mean, someone posted a picture of Obi-Wan from one of the movies where everyone around him has died. And so it's just like, wow, this is crazy that he's dealing with the loss of loss of the Empire, with the Empire destroying what they had set up there, loss of essentially the Jedi Council, loss of all the fellow Jedi, loss of Padme, and the loss in essence of Anakin to the dark side. So there is so much that he is navigating here and having to come to terms with. And isn't it more exciting, Laura, when someone is in transition? It makes us more interested. They're more raw emotionally, and that allows us to connect to them as human beings, because we've all been through that or different transition periods in our life. So all of that really stood out to me. Plus the mixture of the new technology with the old technology, the huts on Tatooine with that fortress Inquisitorius that we saw there, that was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And the new planet, a lot of people describing it Blade Runner-esque, which I understand is just a default comparison, but it does look cool. It reminds me of the two sisters in the Clone Wars, season 7 of Clone Wars, what the location they were kind of in, that area. So I like that we're getting some various looks here and some new characters popping in. And like I said, a badass Uncle Owen. Is he a little more of a, how can I say this, a little more active protector of Luke than we've been initially led to believe? I wonder.
It's a good question, but I gotta say, Joel Edgerton looks so good.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, did the man age since Attack of the I don't think he did. Like, he looks amazing. So it's gonna be such a fun ride to actually process this show when it finally starts airing. Especially the fact, again, that it's airing the week of Star Wars Celebration. I can think of no better
Yeah.
time. We're gonna get to be surrounded by other Star Wars fans. It's gonna be amazing. It's gonna be amazing. There's nothing else to say about it. It's gonna be great.
Can you address the look? Can you address the look? A lot of people complaining about the look of a certain
Oh.
Grand Inquisitor. A lot of people, some people on the side to defend the look, some people on the other side not liking the look. What's your feeling on it? Did you like the narration, the words, all? I mean, the voice, all that. What did you think about that?
Well, I have to say that my Rebels loving heart loved all of the little Rebels references
Mm,
that we got. We also got some references to the Ahsoka novel, which I also loved. So
yeah,
there are all these like little, pinpoints that I really enjoyed about this trailer. I am not in the camp of man, the Grand Inquisitor looks awfully good. Doesn't That's not me. I'm not in that camp. I'm sorry. Like I'm not sure what the correct answer would have been there.
yeah,
I'm not sure why his head is so round.
yeah,
I don't think Rupert Friend's head is quite that round. We know that the Grand Inquisitor's head is more tall. And
yeah.
if you were gonna add somewhere, why go wider? I don't know. I
Mhm.
don't know. So it's not my personal favorite interpretation, but I also understand things that are great in animation don't necessarily translate to live action. Ahsoka's Montrals was one
Mm,
big example that a lot of people had a lot of complaints about. I can kind of see around that because you got to be able to do those stunts in there, and that's an important part of who Ahsoka is and how we would interpret that live action character. I guess maybe the same with the great. Will Time will tell. Not sure.
Were you on the Cad Bane? But did you like the Cad Bane interpretation, or did you have
I
any?
did. I thought he looked
Okay,
good. I thought Cad Bane looked great. So it's there are some hits and some misses, and
yeah.
the Grand Inquisitor for me was a little bit of a miss.
Yeah, it feels like he
Yeah.
didn't wanna shave his head, so they just put a cap over his hair, and that's why maybe his head is that big. I don't know. I don't know. That's what it seemed like to me because the head seemed unusually large. It felt like they just kind of combed it, put the cap on, then put this thing on. But
Yep.
maybe in the end, there's a reason for it. I don't know. But it was cool to see the spinning lightsabers. That was cool to see him using that and all of that. And then certainly Moses Ingram came off of this trailer looking immediately like she's going to be a star in the Star Wars universe, don't you think?
Amen. And I can't help but think, man, like she's just got this look about her where she looks just a little bit the character just looks like a little bit unsure. And
Mm,
I'm just like, ooh, I'm not sure if you're gonna stay a bad guy.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I look forward to watching that transition. So I'm very, very excited about her character. She looked amazing.
yeah.
So yeah, time will tell exactly what her journey's gonna be like.
Agree. I think her and Indira Varma are the two I've pinpointed as maybe not staying on the Empire side of things for the long haul by the end of the series, but we shall see which one actually turns. Because I look forward to it. I love Indira Varma as an actress and seeing her come off that Imperial ship. I was like, that's perfect. That's so perfect. She's so stately and got such a nobility to her that's going to be fun to watch in the show. All right. Anyway, that's our quick thoughts on the Kenobi trailer. You heard Darth Vader's breathing at the end. Certainly, Entertainment Weekly the next day released a first look at Darth Vader, as if we haven't seen Darth Vader before, but a first look of Darth Vader on the actual set of Kenobi, full gear on, the helmet, the whole nine. So, going to be fascinating to see what kind of part he plays in all of this as we go forward. I'm sure, Laura, that's a teaser trailer, so we will get a first official trailer at some point here. As you said, it's going to debut at Star Wars Celebration. The series is, and by the way, for those Star Wars Celebrations people, they're putting more tickets on sale. I think on the 15th, they're dropping more tickets for people to go and get to Star Wars Celebration. So if you haven't got your tickets yet, you might be able to be lucky enough to get some of those. So get prepared for that. Look it up on the internet when those will become available. But yeah, we're going to talk about, and that's May 25th, I think, is when the show comes out. Is that correct? May 25th?
That's correct. Yeah, Wednesday night.
So put that on your calendar, ladies and gentlemen. All right, well, let's get into our main topic today, and that's the idea of attachment. Laura, what brought this about, and where are we going?
You know, a lot of it actually kind of came up from looking at this Obi-Wan trailer. I mean, we kind of had this idea brewing for a little bit, but like this idea of what Obi-Wan is going through emotionally and how, I mean, you mentioned like he's going to be like emotionally raw at some point in this show, probably at least in that first episode where he's still kind of processing things. And that really kind of got me thinking. I'm like, you know, Jedi aren't supposed to be emotionally raw. We're not supposed to see that side of them. Inevitably, we sometimes do. So why not talk a little bit about this idea of attachment in Jedi and, you know, is it really the worst thing for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating when you look at this because you talk about how the Jedi have taught this. And of course, it's very influenced through Lucas. The Buddhist teachings are what kind of influenced this philosophy here in Star Wars, the idea of attachments and what they can lead to, what they can do to you. And we see, I mean, we can really see it through, as we mentioned, Luke, but also Anakin, right? Certainly Anakin, the attachments leading to more negative reactions where Luke fights to not repeat the sins of the father when the attachment issues come up with him. And that is such an interesting thing to explore amongst the Jedi, and certainly amongst the Star Wars fandom. There is debates and arguments over whether the Jedi philosophy about attachments is a positive or a negative in how it's being implemented. Because remember, a philosophical concept is great, but it's implemented by human beings or other species, and it can be twisted or how can I say, manipulated to be a certain thing depending on whose mouth it's coming out of, for sure.
Exactly. So when we're looking at Obi-Wan Kenobi, I mean, obviously the first thing that comes to mind is Anakin when it comes to this idea of attachment. And Anakin had such a different journey than most Jedi younglings have, in that, you know, most younglings are raised in the temple from a very young age, if not infancy. And Anakin was brought there at like what, age 9? And I don't even know if he spent that much time among other younglings because he became Obi-Wan's Padawan at age 9. So at that point in history, when most Jedi younglings are, or most Padawans are, coming into that age around their adolescence, Anakin was thrown into that at age 9, at which point he already had all these attachments to his mother, and he's just thrown into this relationship with Obi-Wan. So naturally, that attachment is going to form. It's going to, in this situation, I think it goes both ways, because we see even later on, or even throughout the Clone Wars, how attached I think Obi-Wan eventually became to Anakin, especially in Revenge of the Sith. We get that line, you were my brother, Anakin, I loved you. Like, Jedi don't say that. They're not supposed to say that to each other. And that was such a moving scene. So it's, at the end of the day, though, with Anakin, all of his attachments, that's kind of the thing that I wanted to talk about. Because, Yoda's telling him, like, this fear of death and this fear of loss is a path to this dark side. You've got attachment leads to jealousy, and that's just the shadow of greed, and it's going to lead you down a dark path. And it's this concept of the Jedi not being able to properly mourn the death of anybody close to them, that I think is the most unnatural thing to any sort of, carbon-based being, to not be able to mourn. We see that so many times in Star Wars, and especially with Anakin really not learning ever to process emotions correctly, or not being allowed to do that, poses a lot of problems throughout the prequel trilogy.
Yeah, I think you make an excellent point here. This idea that he was taken from his mom after having already formed the attachment. As you said, the Jedi learn, as you said, from almost infancy to operate in a world where attachment is not necessary. Attachment is frowned upon. But Anakin, ever the rebel, but dare I say, ever the outlaw, doing his own thing in numerous ways, right? Having already formed the attachment with his mom, with Shmi, and then where he goes, being ripped away from her because he's going off on this adventure with Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan having this Padawan thrust upon him when he wasn't prepared, maybe necessarily to be a master or a teacher or a mentor in any way, shape, or form, because he still had his attachment to Qui-Gon Jinn, which seemed to be pretty strong as well, considering his reaction to Qui-Gon Jinn's death. So there were attachments upon attachments and upon attachments here, and Anakin's is the most complicated and the one that leads to the most darkest turn when he becomes Darth Vader, obviously, because of his fear of losing these attachments, losing the anger of losing his mom, the fear of losing Padme, causing him to choke her out in essence, and the fear that Obi-Wan is taking something from him causes all of these reactions. And in the end, it is when he realizes, when Luke is the one who is willing to sacrifice himself for him, that he realizes, maybe finally in the final breaths of his life, that his attachments, his obsession with his attachments was actually what Yoda said. It's what led to his downfall. And in realizing that letting go of the attachments is what finally leads him to his redemption. So it's an unfortunate, he's a tragic figure in many ways. It doesn't excuse the fact that he killed a bunch of kids to get to supposedly protect his attachment in Padme, but you can understand why he's such a tragic figure and a victim of circumstance in many ways because of these attachments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you talk about this attachment upon attachment, and that Obi-Wan attachment to Qui-Gon is not something that always comes to mind at first.
Yeah.
But the fact that he did react very emotionally to that. He was 25 years old when that
Right.
happened. You would think over the course of his training, he would have like sort of learned to, keep those sort of emotions in check, but he sliced a man in half. So there was a very strong reaction there. In the fact that, that eventually then brushes off on Anakin in some ways. Not that it was inevitable that, just from Anakin's circumstance that it would be
Right.
that way. But Anakin was Obi-Wan's first and only Padawan for 13 years. So the fact that, masters and apprentices are going to form a bond, it's inevitable. It happens with, I think, all of them in some ways. But it just seems so much more pronounced between these two characters. And that made part of their journey really fun to watch,
Yeah.
especially in the Clone War period. That was a really special relationship to sort of keep an eye on. And then to see obviously rub off on Anakin and Ahsoka as he had to sort of take on that relationship or that, role of master as part of his own training.
And also was resistant to it initially as well. Did not want to be a mentor or a master to Ahsoka, and eventually does become that master. And you see that yet another person that's connected to Anakin or under Anakin, Luke, of course, not schooled Anakin, but certainly the son of Anakin. And then here with Ahsoka, they're able to take those lessons and do better things with those lessons than Anakin did. That's what I mean. At the end of the day, Anakin is such a victim of his own anger, a victim of his own fear, a victim of his own jealousy that people are taking things from him. And this you see manifested in multiple situations, leading to more and more anger. And we have, essentially the Darth Vader years are the lost years. We don't know. Did he form? You could argue even his attachment to the Emperor leads him into certain spots to do certain things, to kill millions upon millions of people as Darth Vader before he's finally redeemed at the end of the original trilogy. Lord knows how much death and destruction and mayhem and hurt and devastation he is responsible for, because he developed, in essence, another parental attachment to the Emperor, just like he developed one for Qui-Gon Jinn after having one with Shmi before she passed, or was killed rather. So he is just, as I said, attachment upon attachment, leading to all these negative situations for him, and it's a shame,
Exactly. And it was really kind of even from when it started, it was the beginning of the end when it came to Anakin's training as a Jedi, when it started with his mother. And then
Yeah.
there's an episode in the Clone Wars where Obi-Wan fakes his death, and
Right.
you really see Anakin start to unravel and that anger really start to come out. And then Ahsoka leaves the Order, and he's starting to sort of question everything that's happening around him and with the Jedi Council. And then everything falls apart with Padme. I mean, it was just a snowball effect for this poor guy from the word go. I mean, he never had a chance, and it's really tragic to watch, but it's also, the fact that he seeks out revenge on the Tusken Raiders and slaughters a whole tribe of men, women, and children. It's like sometimes he just makes it really hard to sympathize with him.
He does.
um,
He does. Yeah.
but yeah, but he tries, and the fact that he did so much good for Ahsoka Tano, I think was so meaningful, and we see that kind of play out as we meet up with Ahsoka again later in the canon. That this relationship with Anakin was by far the most enduring and meaningful relationship in her life. And so by the time we catch up with her in The Mandalorian and she meets Grogu and Din Djarin, it's really interesting to sort of watch her. And I just rewatched some of these scenes the other day, but like how sharply she reacts to this prospect of having to train Grogu when she knows exactly what's happening inside of this young being, and she can see all of that vulnerability and that anger and that fear of being without Din, and how that could potentially lead him down a dark path. It's a really fun, it makes it such a great arc to watch, I think, in The
Yeah.
Mandalorian.
Yeah, kind of interesting to see her now as an older Jedi, and that's the honest truth of the discussion of attachment. You can't know it and the perils of it until you go through it. You can be taught it all you want. And remember, Anakin is hiding his love affair with Padme, his marriage, his romance from the Jedi Council. That's an attachment. He is hiding it from the Jedi Council because his attachments are just so much more important to him than anything else. It's more paramount than anything else, including the Jedi Order. And here and Ahsoka here seeing how Anakin goes to the dark side, possibly hearing the stories, understanding how he betrayed the idea of attachment and what it led to. Maybe that reinforces an older Ahsoka to be a bit more adamant about this idea of attachment, and warning Din Djarin about it. Even later on in the Book of Boba Fett, in that episode, same thing. Are you here because you want to give him the chainmail, or are you here because you need him to know that you've given him the chainmail? Who are you here for, him or yourself? And that's the question always with attachment. Are you doing this for yourself, or are you doing this for the other person? And with Anakin, you certainly sense that it is about him, not about the other person. And with Din Djarin, I think the jury's a little bit out right now, because it really seemed like he was desperate to get Grogu back when he showed up on that planet. And so you have to wonder, what's his connection to attachment? Even though he's not a Jedi, what's his connection to attachment? And how is he going to be a good father figure or a good mentor for Grogu if this is the path they're going to walk now after that episode in the Book of Boba Fett?
Exactly. If Din Djarin hasn't learned to let go of these ideals that he was raised with, of,
Mm.
not taking off your helmet and adhering to the creed,
Mm.
if he can't let go of that, how is he supposed to be a good parental figure to Grogu when Ahsoka has told him, I've seen what these kinds of feelings have done to a fully trained Jedi Knight. Like, I'm
Right.
not sure what you expect to get out of this, but it's not going to be anything good.
Yeah.
And the fact that we then pass that, baton onto Luke Skywalker and asking him to potentially train Grogu, I mean, this just opened up such an interesting conversation, I think, with Luke. And the fact that, he was willing to make that choice to actually sit down and train this being that was potentially vulnerable to the same things, that same fear, and that same vulnerability that Anakin fell prey to. The fact
Yeah.
that he was willing to actually still take that chance, I thought, really spoke volumes to Luke's character. But it's definitely interesting to sort of think of it in the perspective of Luke was a very young Jedi still at this point in time when he met Grogu, and still a very young teacher. This was his first student, and he hasn't really figured it out yet.
Yeah.
But he still makes Grogu pick. Like, you can't have both. You need to choose. Do you want the chainmail, or do you want Yoda's lightsaber? And, Vader tried to have both. He tried to have love and be a Jedi. And as a result, the Jedi Order and the Republic both fell.
Right.
So it's just really interesting to kind of think about, like, where exactly is Luke coming from? What does he know and not know? And is hubris potentially playing a role in this, where Luke maybe thinks that he can save Grogu from falling to the same fear and anger that Anakin did?
Yeah, I mean, nothing's worse at times for a person to be how can I say this? Nothing's worse than receiving validation sometimes for a person's point of view. It can, although they were right at times, them being right allows them to think they're even more right as they keep going down their philosophy, because naturally they think, since I was right here, then the next logical thought, I must also be right. I must also be right. I must also be right. And that's what leads to what you mentioned here a few seconds ago, hubris. And maybe that is a little bit of hubris. Why is Luke teaching? Why is he? Who asked him to do this? Why is he willing to do this? Why did he go save Grogu? What is this ultimate goal of his that he's trying to accomplish? Is he trying to make up for I mean, is he trying to, is this his attachment to Yoda? Is this a way of making up for that? Wanting to teach another member of Yoda's species something, what, maybe giving back in some way? What is this desire here? And then, like you said, is he going to be a good teacher or not? Clearly, we haven't seen many students of Luke's of any have positive ends. So, I mean, I would say, I don't know. And certainly Grogu, maybe sensing that, takes off, maybe sensing his hesitation, maybe sensing he's not the right teacher for him, rolls on out and goes back to Din Djarin. So I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think about the fact that, like in Empire Strikes Back, like Yoda and Kenobi like tell him like, "Yo, you can't go to Dagobah, dude. You got to stay here and finish your training.
Yeah.
I know your friends are allegedly suffering, but like that's not the path. You got to stay here and walk this path." And the fact that he leaves anyway,
Yeah.
then proceeds to lose the duel against Vader. He loses Han to Boba Fett, and he loses his hand. So that didn't
Yeah.
actually end up working out all that well for him, that attachment that he had to his friends. But then Anakin's attachment to Luke in Return of the Jedi is what ultimately saves
Yeah.
Luke from
Yeah.
the Emperor, and Luke's attachment to Anakin is what saves Anakin in the end. So
Mhm.
you can definitely see that it's hard to be black and white in that for
Yeah.
Luke Skywalker, just based on what he knows.
Right. And it's Luke's attachment to Leia that almost causes him to go to the dark side in that lightsaber battle with Vader. So I mean, and then eventually he realizes, and that's the moment. Sometimes moments in movies you can just be like, "Oh, cool," but not really look at the significance of the moment more deeply. When he throws away the lightsaber, that is something Anakin couldn't do. And it almost confuses Vader that Luke does this. It is the turning point of not only the lightsaber battle, but of the mental battle with Anakin that he's having there in that back and forth. Him throwing away the lightsaber is him willingly opening himself up to be sacrificed for his belief that he can redeem his father and redeem his soul. And that's what's more important to him. It is not about, once he realizes, oh, I can't give in to the attachment connection with my friends or Leia, I must let go of the attachment and focus on him and be selfless in my approach. That's what changes everything that happens at the end of Return of the Jedi. So that is a positive moment. And in essence, Anakin realizing it is what leads to his redemption, because then he sacrifices himself to save his son by throwing the Emperor down the chute there, and dies. So in essence, he did realize finally, maybe in his last moments, that there was a better, more fulfilling path to walk, letting go of the attachment and sacrificing oneself for others, which is not easy to do, Laura. It's not easy to do.
No, I imagine it's not. I mean, it's that it's that whole conundrum of serving a higher purpose. Are you
Yeah.
willing to sacrifice whatever it takes for the greater good? Which I think is kind of the purpose for the Jedi Order. That's the purpose behind this. You can't have attachments. You
Mhm.
have committed yourself to serving something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
So when it comes to tangible possessions, when it comes to people that you love, it's just it can't happen.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, most Jedi seem to just accept this without argument and resistance. And the Jedi Order existed for 1,000 generations, so it must have worked for a little bit up until it didn't. Just right up until it didn't.
I don't know, Laura. I have a feeling there were quite a few stories about Jedi who didn't 100% commit to the attachment thing. And so they've kind of been brushed under the rug. We're just focusing on these ones currently in our Star Wars lore, because they have had such troubles when doing the attachment thing. as Jedi, because I think it's a very difficult task. You know, priests are
Yeah.
asked to be celibate for their lives once they commit to the order, and we hear terrible things about certain ones in what they do and how it manifests itself in forms of abuse. And it's like, well, there must be a way to find the balance, and the balance of the Force, in essence, here when it comes to attachment. So, are the Jedi right? Are the Jedi wrong? To me, it's a case by case basis, like anything,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Jedi like Kanan Jarrus, who I
Mhm.
kind of think of as like
Sure.
sort of the antithesis to Anakin. And, granted, their journeys were very different, but Kanan had a very strong attachment to the Ghost Crew and especially to Hera. I mean,
Mhm.
he's ends up sort of, his sacrifice in the end, I think, is sort of this perfect example of how attachment in Jedi does not always have to lead to this need for control and this need for possession. There's a balance to be reached there, and I
Yeah.
love that Kanan in Star Wars Rebels was sort of the person to show us that. I
Yeah.
mean, the fact that he left the Jedi, forced out of the Jedi Order by way of Order 66 at age 14,
Yeah.
he kind of drifts through the galaxy for the next like I don't know, 8 years or so until he meets Hera. He falls in love with her the first moment he hears her voice, and from that moment on, it was just he had nothing but eyes for her. And it wasn't the worst thing in the world. It
Yeah.
didn't ultimately, it led to him dying, but at the end of the day, it's
Laura.
just
It led to him
it's
going blind and dying, but still.
a little bit, but like, was it the worst thing in the world that this Jedi was in
Right.
this powerful Force user was allowed to have attachments? Now, granted, he didn't have the Order hanging around. It was just him having to make these choices on his own. But I just think that he's such a powerful example of how it can be done and still done right, and how you can still be a successful Jedi.
Yeah, I mean, when and I go even further back in his life, Laura, when he lost his master, Depa Balaba, when witnesses the death of his master, he does not retaliate with revenge and spend the next 8 years seeking revenge. He is focused on his own path, focused on that is the letting go of attachment. That is the moving on from the attachment. And look, I studied Buddhism for 2 years. It is very, very difficult to move within those tenets and function within those tenets, because this is not a society that breeds that kind of mentality necessarily. Yes, there are avenues for which to be selfless, certainly multiple avenues in the society to be selfless, but our overall mainstream society teaches us constantly about, hey, get what you can, succeed by any means necessary, be successful, be famous, work on your social media all the time, get as many followers and likes for validation as possible, as opposed to, hey, just focus on yourself, work on yourself, contribute to charities, go and spend time at food banks and shelters. That is not necessarily the mainstream approach of our media or any of our or most of our entertainment. And that becomes an issue when you're butting up against this idea of selflessness, because it is a very, I don't think it's a very attractive concept, but it's not easy to put in motion or to implement because of our desire to connect with people and our human primal need to connect with other human beings.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that I think made George Lucas such a great storyteller, is
Mm.
that he wanted to, show I don't think he was preaching, no attachments
Mm.
whatsoever, but to show that balance is
Yeah.
really the key. We're showing that like minimalism is not the worst thing in the world in our capitalist society.
Right.
There's a way to strike a balance.
Yeah.
And I like to think that that's sort of the ultimately the lesson that he was going for, in sort of implementing this Jedi are not allowed to have attachments or
Mm.
marry or have children. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting sort of to think about what exactly was the point behind all of this. And I love that you bring up the idea of Buddhism
Mm.
and all of the things that that preaches and how it sort of connects to these different themes throughout Star Wars. It's just interesting.
Yeah. I suffer from, to be, honest, I suffer from the attachment situation. I suffer from that in so many ways. So that's why I kind of turned to the Buddhism aspect of things to kind of explore that as part to remove that feeling of reacting to attachments in a certain way. And there is a power in and that's the thing. At the end of the day, people must understand. I don't want to veer too far to Star Wars. Must understand though is that you have the power to decide what is important to you and what isn't. You do have the power to decide whose life is important to you and whose isn't, whose words are important to you and who isn't, because those are forms of attachments. It isn't just physical or emotional attachments, attachments to people's words, attachments to people's thoughts about you. Those are attachments. Those are all those things. If you imagine how much more peaceful you could be if you just remove the power of people's words, positive or negative, to affect you, you can move forward in life in a way that is a little more freer. If you can embrace if you can put that in motion and embrace that practice in a powerful way, you never know how much it can change you as a person and bring you more peace than you would have thought. And then by that extension, become more selfless than you would have thought and sacrifice of your time more than you would have thought to help others. So it's an interesting concept that is not always easy to put in motion, for sure.
Exactly. That lesson of, don't let these things consume you, but
Mm.
at the same time, you should be allowed to feel your feelings
Yes.
and, accept change and reality and move forward. And I think that's, it's all sort of in the balance of learning that lesson that I think Star Wars has done a good job of in the end, and
Yeah.
it just makes it makes the storytelling in this universe really interesting, especially I think as we look sort of to the future.
Yeah.
If we jump forward to the sequel trilogy and Rey and
Yeah.
Finn, and the fact that she, went 19 years in the desert without ever really seemingly without forming any attachments to
Yeah.
anybody around her that we know of. And then Finn drops out of the sky and boom, that's the first one.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to sort of think about and watch her relationship with Finn play out throughout the sequel trilogy and then wonder, is she going to pursue this objective that Luke had sort of set out on, which is to reinvent the Jedi Order, and is she going to implement those kinds of teachings?
Yeah. And you could argue with Rey having suffered a loss at a young age that she still remembers in flashes. Some people of importance in her life, obviously, we assume her parents. She is left on this planet, and so because she's had to fend for herself, she's developed an ability to not make attachments with anybody, because attachments lead to loss. Attachments lead to emotional damage in her mind. So in a way, she is implementing the Jedi philosophy before she's officially a Jedi, but implementing them because she might be protecting herself from pain. Remember when BB-8 shows up, even a droid gets initially kicked away from her or moved away, just doesn't want anything to do with the droid, and then eventually concedes and goes off with BB-8. And the same thing with Finn and what have you there. But she is very self-composed, very self-reliant, very self-aware, and there's a power in that. And I think throughout, this is why I love her so much in the sequel trilogy. She does not need anybody, but she
No.
is willing to open the doors to explore the possibilities within herself, to advance, to become better at being a Jedi, to embrace this new power and to hone it and to use it for good and to use it to help others. And for, I think, almost the entire sequel trilogy, when she does use it for good and to help others, and is still willing to be in service even after she witnesses the death of Han Solo right in front of her, which is an attachment that had been growing with her in the movie. And then later on, when she might be losing her own life at Kylo's hands, that also comes through in those moments as well. She is selfless for wanting to sacrifice herself to save the universe, and I think there's power in that.
She's definitely stronger than I would be. I mean, the fact that if BB-8 rolled up to me and was like, "Please, can I go home with you?" I would. There's no way that I feel like anybody could say no. So that one's got some willpower in her. I swear to God.
Yeah.
But when it comes to Finn, the fact that he was raised as this faceless stormtrooper his entire life, and the fact that Poe is like that first person that he imprints on Poe and Rey in this great way in The Force Awakens, and then that just never goes away. And then by the time we get to Rise of Skywalker, they're like, "Oh yeah, remember we were gonna make Finn a Jedi, maybe?" And like now he's got these attachments. I'm like, what is that going to lead to ultimately if he's going to ultimately become one of these students, and probably in the future one of these teachers in Rey's temple, if that is in fact the direction the storyline wants to go.
Yeah, that's going to be fascinating, right? Because as you point out in your notes here, he's 24, which is way, way, way older than the usual age for Jedi training. But maybe because it's out of the box in terms of its approach, it can work, and in the end, can yield a new approach to being the Jedi, new approach to creating a new Jedi Order that finds its own new balance within the new situations of the universe. And there's no way, you're deep into the High Republic stuff, you're reading all this stuff, Laura. There's no way that there haven't been, occasional missteps by the Jedi, transformative times where the Jedi have, or transitional times where the Jedi have changed in their approach, or changed in their philosophy, or changed in their point of view of things, because circumstances necessitated it. So I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing isn't happening here and we move into a new Jedi Order. And I have a feeling, Laura, that we will see Daisy Ridley and Boyega back. I mean, Oscar Isaac already has come back to do that video. So that's, to me, for the Galaxy Star Cruiser. So that, to me, is like the opening of the door just a little bit for the possibility that the three of them could return down the road in better hands, in a better situation, to reprise these roles. And then we might explore a new Jedi philosophy here that would be put in motion.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people are maybe like leading into the fact that in the Legends storyline, Luke Skywalker restarts the sort of Jedi Order and
Right.
encourages his Jedi to get married and have children. You got to rebuild the order. You might as well do it with the people that you know of the Force. I mean, there was definitely some sense to it. But yeah, it'll be interesting to sort of see if that philosophy works its way in to a post-sequel trilogy world. I kind of don't think that it will, but it would just be interesting to see it happen. And yeah, what's going on in the High Republic is fascinating because it's even more loosey-goosey with the like no sexual relationships, and that's really fun to read. So there's great stuff in the novels. I mean, there's a whole relationship with Quinlan Vos and Asajj Ventress, and you want to talk about flirtation with the dark side. In Dark Disciple, we see both of them go through that as they're both trying to sort of process this attachment that they form to each other. So there's so many great examples of it in Star Wars that play out, some for better and some for worse. And whether it's all for better or worse is hard to say. There's definitely some components of the Jedi philosophy that are really questionable. This whole, how much of this is rooted in suppressing emotions and not addressing things and not working through them. It's, a lot of that just isn't healthy and doesn't help anybody, but there are definitely some advantages to the idea of letting go of these attachments in life. So it's a balance for sure.
Like anything in life, right? And
yeah,
that's what you wonder about when you approach a philosophy like this, is how do you implement it in a way that works for you overall, but also works for the general good, especially when you have that kind of power as a Force user would have. And look, we focused on Jedi, but I mean, the attachments that the Sith can have with each other at times can lead to even worse things than what brought them together. So that's always in the air on that side of things as well. Of course, there isn't a philosophy about Sith and attachments and all of that, but attachments in any level on any situation will lead to, if you have an unstable approach to them, will lead to negative outcomes way more often than not. And so you have to be aware of how you put those things in motion and really check in. That's the number one thing, is check in. People, I was reading an article before we started doing this idea of Anakin. What if Anakin had been able to talk to the council about his stuff? What if Anakin had been able to talk about his attachments, his emotions? What if he felt it was a space that he could talk about this stuff and unburden himself? Would he have found a healthier approach to these relationships, to these attachments down the road? So that's another part of this. You have to have some self-analysis, but also a place to speak about this stuff and be heard, and open the doors of your mind and the perception of things to look at it in a whole new way that can allow you to be healthier, or to come out of that healthier than when you went in.
All the Jedi needed therapy. That's the moral of the story. Anakin, most of all, he just needed somebody to talk to. Literally anybody. He couldn't talk to anybody. Like, come on. Poor guy.
You need that primal scream therapy, just sitting out on the edge of the galaxy, yelling it all out That I think would have been good for him overall.
Yep.
Well, any final words to wrap up this, or is there more you wanted to touch upon on the attachment issue here?
No, I think that wraps it up. It was a great conversation.
Okay, there we go. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the Jedi Way. We hope we entertained you, kind of brought some new points of views into this idea of attachment in the Jedi Order here and how it's affected Star Wars characters through multiple decades and multiple centuries in the world of Star Wars. And we hope you enjoyed our conversation on the Kenobi teaser trailer. Hope you're excited. Obi-Wan Kenobi teaser trailer. Hope you all are excited to see it and looking forward to it on May 25th. Certainly, we'll cover it in some form here and possibly be doing reviews of it. If we can convince Laura to come on back to the Geek Buddies to review it with us, that's certainly going to be something we look forward to if we can do it. But keep your eye out for all of it. And remember, this show comes to you every couple of weeks, every 2 weeks, bringing you a new conversation about a philosophy or a scene or an incident or an idea or a concept in the world of Star Wars. So thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Jedi Way. Laura, another fun one. Please let people know where they can find you and everything you got going on.
Sure, come find me on Twitter at shutup_Laura. That's my handle on Instagram as well. And the show that I host with my friend Alice is called Force Toast, a Star Wars happy hour. You can find that show on Twitter at Force Toast Pod. Alice and I will be back this coming Tuesday, March 15th, with a new episode. We'll probably talk a lot about Kenobi. It'll probably be a lot of Kenobi talk, to be honest, as well as the end of the High Republic comic run that just wrapped up a couple of weeks ago. So lots to discuss.
There you go. And as for me, you can find me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, The Outlaw Nation on Twitch. Please subscribe to the channel down below. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell button, trying to march towards 25,000 subscribers as quickly as we can. Remember to share this video on your social media. You let people know, hey, The Outlaw Nation is a cool place to come and enjoy some Star Wars content. And remember to leave a comment down below. That's really important. Leave a comment and a like. Those elevate the visibility of the show and everything we do here on the Outlaw Nation channel. Anything else? Oh, and don't forget my other podcast, The Top 10, The Cinephiles, and The Geek Buddies, all out there for you to enjoy. All right, Laura, what do we have to tell them before we wrap up here?
Until next time, remember, your focus determines your reality.